Welcome everybody, I'm Music Nerd here, and we're going to do another beginner's guide video. This time covering 1990s West Coast hip hop. I'm going to be recommending you 5 essential albums for you to get into this genre if you haven't already, and we got some real great classics here that I'm excited to talk about. Before I get into the video, I want to thank you very much for having this channel reach 500 subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you for all the love and all the support, but I think we can grow this channel even more. I would love to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can do it. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the content in this channel, hit the like button down below, hit the subscribe button down below, and your return subscriber, hit the notification bell to be alerted for new content. If you may have missed it, we did an album draft with a special guest, Kira Was a Diver, and we had a blast doing that, talking about the best albums of 1996. So if you haven't checked out that video, please check that out. First I want to talk about, and I want to show some love to Oakland, because sometimes they don't really get their praise into shaping West Coast hip hop, but we got to talk about arguably the best MC to come out of Oakland, or at least the most recognizable, Too Short, with his 1990 classic Short Dogs in the House. Now, Too Short has been around the game for 4 decades now, and he has crafted his own unique sound that basically brought Oakland into the hip hop mainstream. And his last album, Life Is Too Short, did very well commercially, but this album, still kind of showed him broadening his horizons a little bit. Still had that commercial sound, still had him having these lyrics dealing with sex and pimping, but he was also talking about the social ills of the ghetto. Now, there was a rumor coming around this time that Too Short died in a crack house and he OD'd on cocaine. Too Short released this album to kind of prove those doubters wrong. I mean, there was no social media at the time. You could have just said, hey guys, I'm not dead. I didn't OD on crack cocaine. The album release also works as well. And this album also featured the first time that Northern California artists and a Southern California artist collabed in an album. He had Ice Cube do a guest verse on this album, and it's fantastic. And I think one of the big album highlights for this is Ghetto, which is a sample of the classic Donny Hathaway song The Ghetto, and it's Too Short talking about the crack epidemic and talking about gang violence in Oakland and how he wished the community can be better. In fact, Roberta Flack, who was a dear friend of Donny Hathaway, actually thanked Too Short for covering this sample and this topic. So, Too Short, we may know him as the lovable kind of sex innuendo guy, but it showed that he was able to, if he wanted to provide social commentary, he could do it as well, and he did it fantastically. And I know Dr. Dre gets a lot of credit for shaping G-Funk, but Too Short did it 2 years before Dr. Dre came out with The Chronic. This sound had huge influence on later West Coast hip hop artists, including Dre and even Snoop Dogg especially. I mean, look at the album cover. Look how similar it is to the Doggystyle album cover. And I'm sure that Snoop Dogg, paying homage to Too Short's sound, also did the same thing with the album cover. So yeah, definitely check this album out. Too Short doesn't get enough love in the hip hop history, but is a very influential artist in the 90s. Alright, next album, we're going to be talking about Ice Cube. And I could talk about America's Most Wanted, which was his first album after he broke out of NWA, very successful, but it didn't really epitomize the West Coast sound. Kind of went to New York, he partnered with the Bomb Squad, who produced Public Enemy's albums. I could go with his most successful album, The Predator, which debuted at #1, but to me, my favorite Ice Cube album, and I think the album that kind of put West Coast hip hop into the mainstream, was his second album, Death Certificate, which came out 30 years ago. Kids of a certain generation may think of Ice Cube as his lovable, are we there yet kind of movie guy, but man, this album holds nothing back. He goes at pretty much everybody, even the black community, and there are some songs here that you just cannot make today. But it was a great time capsule of what LA was like in the early 90s. This was a year before the Rodney King trials. This was before the O.J. Simpson thing. And, LA was kind of like reaching that breaking point. Police brutality, the Latasha Harlins thing that happened. in that same year. So LA was kind of like a volcano that was getting ready to burst, and Ice Cube was kind of like, you know, CNN, just talking about everything that was going on in his surroundings. And of course he does it with some trademark sarcasm and humor, but for the most part this album is very dark, and it showcases why Ice Cube at the time was one of the best rappers out there and one of the best storytellers, and you know, closes it out with one of the best diss tracks in hip-hop history, No Vaseline, just going at his entire NWA crew, and basically he just like picks them off like, you know, an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, just like one by one. An incredible album. Ice Cube at the top of his game. Check out this album, please, if you are very into like West Coast hip hop, especially if you're fans of like Kendrick Lamar or, you know, Nipsey Hussle, those type of West Coast artists. Ice Cube was the OG, great West Coast hip hop, G-funk sound, but marrying it with great storytelling, impactful lyrics, and a colorful personality. Next album that I want to talk about, the Pharcyde's Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde. This was their first album that came out in 1992. Now, at the time, alternative hip hop wasn't as big as it is today. You had Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, you know, the whole Native Tongue things, but that was in the East Coast. West Coast didn't really have that type of alternative hip hop, and when the Pharcyde came along, it was a breath of fresh air. It was totally against what Ice Cube and Ice-T and NWA was doing at the time. It was more of like, you know, softer, you know, more wittier, lighter affair to that West Coast hip hop sound in the 90s. And this is a classic. This has influenced tons of artists. Lupe Fiasco, Kanye West has said that this is his favorite album of all time. And of course, we all know, if you are a Pharcyde fan, you know the biggest song, you know, Passing Me By, which would later go on to be sampled by Joe for the song Stutter, which became a #1 hit, a song that I finally remember as a kid. But I remember when I listened to that Joe song, I was like, you know, this is a great beat, and wondering where it came from, and it stems from this song, and it's an incredible song. You know, Pharcyde, what made them different is that, you know, they had some intelligent but smooth, you know, lyrics. The chemistry amongst this group is phenomenal. It's kind of a shame that they didn't really get really big. Tribe was probably the biggest alternative hip hop group, and, you know, the Fugees and Outkast later on, but all those groups wouldn't be around and have the success they would have had if it wasn't for the Pharcyde doing it first. They were playful, but they were also socially conscious. Pharcyde's dope. Check out their stuff, especially this album, if you want to hear great 90s West Coast hip hop. Alright, the next album we'll be talking about, I mean, even if you're not a hip hop fan, we all know about this album, Dr. Dre's The Chronic. Dr. Dre, after NWA broke up, really was just lost ashore and didn't know what to do. And so he got with his friends, he hooked up with Suge Knight, you know, got together with Death Row Records, and just put out an album that basically just changed the world. The production on this, even 30 years later, is immaculate. Say what you want about the lyrics, and yes, the lyrics, they have not held up for sure, but the production is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the best produced hip hop albums of all time, and it's Dr. Dre's use of samples, you know, really implementing that Parliament Funkadelic, that 70s soul and funk that is so potent, really enhancing it and making it his own style. And some of the songs here, Let It Ride and Dre Day, you know, there's a reason why these are timeless classics, because the production is just phenomenal. And of course, you know, we can't talk about The Chronic without talking about Nothing But a G Thing. In my opinion, it's the Smells Like Teen Spirit of hip hop. This is the song that changed hip hop overnight. It not only brought the attention from East Coast to West Coast, just like the turn of a dime. Gangster rap, its appeal wasn't just to the streets anymore, it was to the suburbs. And of course, that brought its own deal of controversy. To me, Snoop Dogg kills it in every song here. Couldn't ask for a better start to a career. It was the deep cover song, and then this album, he just absolutely shines. Him and Dr. Dre, their chemistry is amazing. You had the Dog Pound coming in here, and other members of Death Row appearing here and there. There's other songs too, like Little Ghetto Boy, which shows them kind of talking about, you know, what happened, the LA riots. The Chronic was released months after that happened. And so the Chronic was really a great document of like Death Certificate of LA, you know, obviously in a different point because now we're at a time in LA where shit is really not going well. This is one of the best hip hop albums of all time. Check it out. Speaking of Snoop Dogg, you know, we can't talk about this genre without talking about his solo album, Doggystyle, which came out a year later in 1993. This was actually the first album in history to debut at #1 from a new artist. Obviously, this was heavily anticipated, arguably at the time, the most heavily anticipated hip-hop album of all time, and of course, it wanted to become the fastest selling rap album of all time until Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP. But that just goes to show you the power of Snoop Dogg. I mean, his work on The Chronic and the Deep cover single, it went to show you how just popular this guy was while even releasing his own stuff. And then when you know, What's My Name came out, it was like, boom, this guy's a superstar. Snoop Dogg was such a unique figure. You know, nobody sounded like him at the time. And of course, he spawned a lot of bad imitators since then. Yeah, everybody in hip-hop at that time was either yelling or screaming, saying, I'm the best. People yelling at the top of their lungs. And Snoop Dogg was just like, you know, I'm just gonna chill. You know, I'm just gonna be that guy. I'm gonna say some real, like, cold shit, you know, about the gangster stuff, and, you know, but it was a smooth delivery. You never knew when he was excited or when he was depressed. He was monotonous, but it worked to his advantage. So that's what made Snoop very unique. You know, in my opinion, guys like Snoop Dogg paved the way for 21 Savage. Think of 21 Savage, the way that he raps. The fucking guy has a very stone cold delivery. You don't know when this guy is happy or sad or whatever. I will also say about this album is that Dr. Dre also produced this one, and yes, it does sound very similar to The Chronic, but I think a lot of people were like, okay, sounds similar. It's incredible. The production still holds up. The production's still incredible. I mean, listen to Gin and Juice and tell me that song doesn't slap 30 years later. And yeah, I mean, Snoop Dogg is a cult of personality. I would say that he kind of had the Illmatic syndrome. He never could quite top what this album did and its impact. And I think nowadays he's bigger than his music. It's okay that he hasn't really topped this album, but as this album stands, it's still an incredible album. Great songs to party to. Basically put him on the map and continued West Coast dominance over the hip-hop scene. So yeah, those are my 5 essential albums if you want to get into 1990s West Coast hip-hop. YouTube recommends these 2 videos after you check out this one. I also did East Coast hip-hop 90s beginner's guide, so showing some East Coast love as well. Check out that video. Till next time, peace.